Good afternoon. Welcome to Primetime. For those of you who are sitting towards the back, out of consideration for the people with the microphones who'll be running up and down trying to get you the microphone for the question, if you can move down a little bit, that'd be very helpful. My name is Paul Grantham with the Office of Communication Services, and we're glad to have you here at Primetime. Today we are very fortunate to have with us President Richard Brodhead, who will be talking about the state of the university, both where we are today and where we hope to go in the days ahead. But I also have a couple quick announcements before we invite him up. We'll have a section in the program where we allow you to ask questions about what's on your mind. We have two people, Leonore and I, over in this aisle, and Jeffrey Mock over in this aisle, who have microphones. And if you would raise your hand, we'll try to get a microphone to you so that we can all hear your question. And then for those who are watching online, you can send in your questions on the Primetime website or by emailing working@duke.edu. So after the program today, we also have a reception recognizing the kickoff of the campaign, the Duke Forward campaign this weekend. There's some food upstairs in Schaefer Mall. So as you exit the theater here, there's some stairs immediately towards the back. If you would take those up, you'll find the food and refreshments there. And then also at the end of our session today, hopefully you picked up a raffle ticket on the way in. We will be selecting two individuals to continue the conversation later at a date to be determined with lunch with President Brodhead, one of the individuals who are here today, and then one from those of you who sent in a question ahead of time. So we will ask President Brodhead, if you would, to help us select those. So you came here today to hear from President Brodhead, so please join me in welcoming him to the stage.
How's that? Rumble, rumble, rumble. Am I going to make thunderous sounds?
All right, everybody, I think they can hear us. So why don't we start by just, I'd love to hear your impressions. We are starting off a new academic year, about where we are and kind of what do you see ahead for us here at Duke?
Well, first of all, let me thank those of you who came in person. I hope none of you came to win the raffle. And I always live in fear that at the end I will win the raffle, but if I do, I'll share it with you. And actually, the last time we had a prime time, we discovered that there were something like 10 times or 12 times as many people watching online. So my salutes to those of you who are having lunch or at your work or watching this in other places. Well, you asked me what it's like at Duke. Duke is a great big place, 37,000 employees almost, and when you consider all the things we do here, and I think what just gives me such continual pride and satisfaction in the job I have here is any part of this university you take and dip into, you'll find people who are not just doing the job competently, but doing it, really trying to maintain a level of excellence that gives Duke its name. And I could take these examples, maybe I'll start from the north and go to the south. This summer, the Secretary of Health and Human Services identified 5 universities in America to be the leaders in developing a kind of nursing program that will train people for areas where there aren't the kind of healthcare personnel that are needed for healthy lives. She knew that one of the places that could produce a program like that was Duke, and she came here to make the announcement. So that made me so proud. Of course, when I'm there, I see the new cancer center that opened last year, which is just extraordinarily thoughtful. It's not just that it's modern. We've all been to hospitals that were modern. The point about this one is it's thought out from the point of view of the needs of patients, the needs of their families, just such an incredibly thoughtful thing. Then I'm going to go from the north to the south. Everybody knows I live at the bottom of the football stadium. And Duke football, that's something I could be happy about this year. When I think Why, thank you very much. Okay, and since we got to that, I'll just say, I love the fact that we have a 3-on-1 record at this point, and soon to be a 4-on-1 record. But also, I get to see these kids in many dimensions, and the fact that our offensive line spent 10 days this summer building wells in rural Ethiopia. There's many ways to build bodies, and one is to go to an exercise room. The other is to carry bags of cement 1.5 miles to make something that you'll leave behind for the benefit of others. I love that spirit. At the beginning of school, when all our freshmen arrive, and it's so extraordinarily exciting, I think they regarded as the biggest celebrities on this campus, and they were right too, the 2 Duke undergraduates who won medals in the Olympics this year, Nick McCrory and Abby Johnston. And you see these kids walking around campus. They've got book bags on their back, right? They look just the same as everybody else. There's only one little difference about them. They jump off 30-foot-high platforms and do 4.5 somersaults and enter the water while creating no splash. And so, I like a university where whether I cut into the nursing school, whether I cut into athletics, wherever you were to cut into it, anywhere around, you find just this idea that the fun thing is to do things excellently in all different domains of activity. And so for me, that's the story of Duke.
30-foot platforms, I think that's no risk for you, right? I mean, metaphorically speaking, you jump off those all the time.
Without having learned how to do all the twists and turns on the way down. I'll tell you, I do almost anything, but I am not going to attempt one of those dives.
So the job of president, really, you don't clock out at the end of the day, and your weekend, I think, was an interesting one. So we just launched the Duke Forward campaign this weekend and announced a goal of raising $3.25 billion. Can you tell us a little bit more about this campaign and
Sure.
the goal of it and why we're pursuing it?
Sure, with pleasure. Sometimes people wonder, why are universities always raising money? Don't they have enough money? Don't they already have a lot of money? One of the things that I think you have to understand about a place like Duke is we do so many things, and it is very expensive to do the things we do. We have 6,000 undergraduate students. Almost half of them are on some form of financial aid. We spend $120 million a year on financial aid. Every single thing we do here, go to the medical complex and look at the new hospital building, look at the cancer center. These things aren't cheap. And so we're always needing to find the sources of revenue to support the elemental activities of the university. But then there's a further dimension, which is the whole story of Duke, very specific tradition of this university. This is a school that wherever it was in the present, there's always been a hunger to figure out what could we really be? What could we grow into? What's the promise we could fulfill and the service we could render to the world? And the thing is, it's always taken philanthropy to make those changes. This school, I love telling people this or reminding it, I hope you all know it. This started as a one-room schoolhouse. It was basically a high-end elementary school in Randolph County. And then it turned into a college, and then it moved to Durham, and then it became a university. And each of those, it wasn't about the money, but people knew it took money to make an educational dream come true. And that's really, we see ourselves as in that great tradition. Washington Duke gave the money to move Trinity College to Durham. Julian Carr gave the fairgrounds, and that became the East Campus, the original campus of Duke. When James B. Duke died, he left the money that turned a small college into a famous university. And so now we're trying to raise the money so that 10 or 15 years from now, this place will be seen to have continued on a rising trajectory of trying to offer the most important kinds of education to our students, to lead the most consequential research in the fields that matter so much to the world, in fields medicine, healthcare, environment, education, all those fields. And it takes investment. The thing that was great about this weekend, we asked many of our top supporters if they would come to campus for a launch of the campaign. We expected a certain number. About 200 more people came than we expected. People love this place because it enables them to turn money into something more valuable than money. That's what universities do. We turn it into education. We turn it into promise fulfilled. We turn it into knowledge. And I guess I won't conceal from you, we announced this weekend that we have actually raised $1.3 billion on our way to the $3.2 billion goal. We are... It's nice to have friends like that.
So one of the questions, we've seen a lot about the announcement this weekend and the goals. How do you see employees who work here kind of being involved in the campaign? How can they help support the campaign?
Well, I mean, if you'd like to make a large contribution, you can come up and speak to me afterward. If it consists of your lottery ticket, I'm going to be pretty disappointed. Well, many different ways. The truth is, the best way faculty, students, and staff support this university is by striving for excellence in their work. And when donors come to this campus, we had people speak on Saturday night. So you had Joanne Kurtzberg, one of the first people to develop stem cell therapy. And a guy came on stage whose life she saved when he was 5, who's now a medical student here or a medical postdoc here. And so, you say that these are the miracles that only research universities can create. When people, if you go and say, I'd like you to support Duke University, the needle doesn't move. But when you show people the quality of person who works here and how meaningful their work is to them and how hard they try for it, that's the best thing any of you can do to support the university, is just to do your job the best and most imaginatively you can and loyally you can, and then the rewards from outside follow from that. As for information about the campaign, there's a splendid website, a Duke Forward, and the K has like a diagonal going forward, so it lures you forward. And you can learn a lot more about the campaign from that.
Some wonderful work by a lot of people, I think, that carry this weekend off. What's next
great.
in terms of the campaign?
Well, I learned some years ago that when you announce a fundraising campaign, you would never announce it until you'd actually done some groundwork. And so that's why we wanted to raise enough money to have confidence we could eventually reach the goal. Now we've launched it on this campus. There's been a lot of communication on campus. Now we're going to be going, I'll at some point in this year be staging a launch of the Duke campaign in Atlanta, in Los Angeles, in San Francisco, in New York, in London, all the places around the world. So that's part of the campaign. A campaign is a marathon. And so what somebody said to us is, now's the time when you have to sort of slow down for the sake of getting there in the long run. But I'm positive we'll get there in the long run. The last time Duke ran a campaign, it exceeded its goal by almost 40%.
Wow. So that's the campaign. Talk to us a little bit about what our current financial situation is. We hear these, big awards like over $1 billion already raised. How does that affect or impact our current operating budget and how we operate here going forward?
Well, one thing I think you do understand is that people don't make multi-million-dollar gifts in order to run the place day by day. The gifts that come to achieve specific purposes. Bruce Karsh, our alum from California, gave a $50 million gift in support of endowment funds for financial aid. But I can't use that to make the payroll tomorrow, and actually people don't give money to us to make our payroll. So this is about long-term priorities of the university and putting support under them. I remember, it doesn't seem so long ago, that whenever I did a Primetime with you guys, the meaning was we were in the middle of a financial meltdown. I guess I did one in 2007. Who knows what la-la land we were living in there, but I remember the ones from 2008 and 2009, and I remember informing everybody at this university that we were going to have to take $100 million out of the working budget of the university, and that we were all going to have to work together to find a way to do this artfully and in a way that preserved the highest and most serious priorities of the university. I would just like to offer you my thanks for how well that was done. We had voluntary retirement programs, more than 400 people elected it, as a result of which we did not have mass layoffs here. Many universities did, and I know of some that are continuing to have them nowadays. So we pulled our belt in a notch at that time, and that was an important thing. And now we're through the financial crisis. But I think that, all you have to do is read the papers to understand the economic circumstances that we're in now aren't those of renewed and certain plenty. We're in uncertain times economically, and so the university still needs to behave with prudence. The worst thing for us to do would be, you finally succeed in losing the 15 pounds, and then you put it right back on, and then you discover you have to lose it again. That would not be sensible. So we're still in a state, we're through a difficult time. We got through it, I think, as well as any university in this country. But we're still in a time where we have to be careful, as every family does, and make sure you spend it on the things that matter rather than on the things that matter less, and then you don't have it for the things that matter.
It's still an issue of choices right now.
The choices, sure.
Let's talk a little bit about emerging trends in higher education.
Okay.
So one of those that we've seen more discussion around is online learning and universities kind of making courses available online.
Yep.
What do you think about this trend, and how do you see it impacting us here at Duke?
It's incredibly interesting. You know, when the internet first existed, people talked as if you'd be able to solve age-old problems of education right away. I remember, you know, Mississippi always had the lowest literacy rate in the country. And I remember when someone tried to make it so that every school child in Mississippi had a computer. But, you know, it turned out that didn't solve the problem all by itself. And I think educational technology at that point was still fairly rudimentary. It's grown much more sophisticated nowadays. You know about these things, your kids do if you don't. The Khan Academy, this guy who made a series of videos, I think in his room in his parents' house with some cheap camera. You can learn the history of evolution by watching Khan Academy. I learned how to solve certain algebra problems I never correctly understood when I was in high school. I thought to myself, I'm going to watch one of these videos and see if I could get it. I got it. You know, my teacher didn't teach it to me, so I got it the first time, but now I got it from online. So now we're entering the phase where all of a sudden everybody's very excited about this, and there is surely lots of promise in it. And Duke is participating in that promise. There's a company called Coursera, Coursera. All the classes on it are free. None of them are credit bearing, but they're all free. Anyone in this room can take any class on that. Duke has, I think, 8 or 10 courses up on the Coursera website, and one of the most widely enrolled in the entire country is a course taught by a philosophy professor at Duke named Walter Sinnott Armstrong. It's a class in reasoning and argumentation. Wouldn't it be great if more people understood those valuable skills? So that's great. I mean, but at the same time, you know, the one caution I would say, and I think we need to continue to experiment. We know that there are old-fashioned ways of teaching that you're not going to easily replace with online, and we know there's old-fashioned ones that were never good ways of teaching, and maybe we can supplement them with online. But the one thing I would caution is I would criticize any school that wasn't willing to experiment in this domain, but any school that thinks that online is the magic bullet that will solve all the problems of education, that's also just plain not true. And I'll tell you, you know, people say to me, many people say things like this: don't you realize that 10 years from now there won't be any Duke anymore? Because no one's going to need to go any place to go to college anymore, because they'll be able to do it all online. You've heard this argument. You know, I'm not worried about it. There are things you can learn online, and there are things you can only learn when you're in the company and in relationship with other living people. There's reasons why parents of newborns don't put a video cam on the crib and go to other countries. You know, in the most profound sense, humans learn with humans. They learn in the company and in relationship with humans. So I see the future of Duke. You know, already we've been teaching people business classes, nursing classes, divinity classes online. We have rich offerings, and I think that's great that we do. And I'm going to guess every course here is going to turn out to have a technological dimension in the future. But the place that gets it right will be the place that gets the best of online combined with the best of face-to-face, person-to-person learning, because the value of that is only going to go up. It's not going to go down.
Right.
Okay. So that's what I'd like to make Duke. I don't think this is an unreasonable ambition, that we could make this a place that tries to get the very best combination of residential, communal, face-to-face education mixed with the best of technological education.
You mentioned the future of Duke, and a part of our future now lies in China with the campus that's being developed there in Kunshan.
Sure.
Where are we with that campus, and why is that the right strategy for Duke?
I'll answer your question obliquely, but I will answer it. This summer I went, do you all know that Duke has a marine lab down on the coast There's a place, one of the two places where all the water comes in from the ocean into the sounds. It's an irreplaceable ecosystem, one of the most important in the world. During the middle of the Depression, someone persuaded Duke to buy a piece of land on a place called Pivers Island, right next to Beaufort. And because that land was bought then, Duke now is at the forefront of the study of oceans in the world. And oceans are not only important in themselves, but of course they have massive effect on climate, food sources, all kinds of things of that sort. But you know what? If nobody had said in 1938, well, of course Duke is in Durham, but let's have a little bit of Duke be in Pivers Island, we would have missed that whole capacity that we've developed. I feel the same way about the campus in China. Duke's main campus is always going to be here. Compared to this place, that's a fairly small venture, not a tiny one. You know, but in truth, I don't think you need me to, I hope I'm not breaking any news to you if I tell you China is going to be a very important player in the lives of everybody now alive, and certainly when our students grow to maturity. I was told at the end of World War II, 46% of the economy of the world was in the United States, and now it's 26%. Not because we've declined, but because other places have risen. And so if you want your students to be educated, they have to understand, in some part, a world of which China is a part. And so we know if you want to study aging, you can study it in this country, but guess what? There's 5 times more aging people in China, so you can study it. So I see it as an educational resource, learning about the world and learning about subjects in which China helps to provide information. You may have seen the notice. This has been under discussion quite actively since 2010. Getting through Chinese bureaucracy has been an education for me. I mean, sometimes people speak of China as the country where you can do anything in 5 minutes. I'm telling you, that may be true of some things. It is not true of other things. Winding our way through the municipal bureaucracy, provincial bureaucracy, but finally we got the key approval from the Chinese government at the end of this summer. The buildings are well along in construction. And 2 extremely important things. We've hired the leadership for that campus. By Chinese law, we need to have a Chinese official in a ceremonial role. And the president of one of the top 10 universities of China, President Liu of Wuhan University, one of the principal developers of GPS technology in China, has become a very enthusiastic supporter of Duke Kunshan University, and so he'll have that role. And then a wonderful person named Mary Bullock, who got a PhD in China studies and then helped to engineer the first exchanges of scientists between China and the United States, and then was later the president of Agnes Scott College. So she knows China backward and forward, she knows US education backward and forward, and on campus we've seen a growing interest and investment of faculty. Now we actually have too many faculty who want to go teach something at Kunshan for us to accommodate everybody at first, but it will grow.
So let me bring our attention back here to the campus in Durham. We're beginning to see some changes in the landscape here. Can you tell us a little bit about the major construction projects and how the landscape here is going to change?
I could, yeah, sure. And if you walked into the Bryan Center by walking along the plaza, you could see a construction project. Now, you know that during the downturn, if you didn't know anything about the financial news, one way you could have understood we were in a downturn is that construction virtually came to a stop on this campus. We'd gone through a period of building all these laboratories, building a museum, building libraries. Those were plush times, and we got a lot of benefit during those times. The one thing I will always be gladdest of about my presidency is that we did not dig a gigantic hole to start an expensive project in 2008 and then find we were unable to complete the project. So we tapered back construction, but now it started up again. I'm sure you read, we were the recipients of an $80 million gift. So West Union, the principal student eating place, is going to be totally redone. Page Auditorium is going to be redone. Baldwin Auditorium is already well advanced. In medicine, have you been up around that circle by the nursing school recently? It's incredible. There is a new hospital, there is the new Cancer Institute, the new medical education building that'll be opening, I guess, in the early months of next year. Lots of things going on. if anybody is here from the Nicholas School, the Nicholas School has not had a place where the whole school could be integrated. Nursing used to have that problem when we solved it. So now we're in the process of beginning the extension to LSRC that will create a building worthy of our environment school. So a bunch of projects. Right. The funny thing is, I'll tell you something. Duke looks like a university. When you drive up, there's the chapel, and here's all these Gothic buildings. It's just so perfect and ancient looking. Of course, it was. The Duke Chapel wasn't even open until 1935. My father was 15 when Duke Chapel opened. So even the oldest parts of Duke aren't that old, right? This is an ongoing construction project, this university, you could call it. But I do think something that's really quite wonderful about this university is we haven't broken up the old parts, but we have supplemented them in other places in ways that are harmonious and I think not clashing. And I certainly intend for that to continue.
Speaking of old and new, what about new campus? I mean, that was a discussion that had a lot of momentum before the recession. Where are we with that?
Paul, if you would like to make me out a check for about $150 million, I could give a different answer to this question. At some point in its history, Duke needs to build a residential extension of the campus. We've actually achieved that goal in various ways in the meantime. But and we had planned a project, and we still have the plans, and I hope someday it will come to pass. I know someday it will come to pass. But I do consider that's a little bit what I was alluding to when I said I'm very glad we didn't dig a hole for a building we then couldn't afford to build. That would have been a risky step to take then, and but it's still there in the future. In the meantime, we've tried to solve the problem of inadequate residential and social space on campus in a ton of ways. We built a new dormitory called K4. If you've ever driven up Anderson, you know that Central Campus used to be, it used to look like a very disreputable sort of failing 70s condo project. It's been spiffed, and when you go there, that restaurant there, those playing fields there, it's quite a desirable neighborhood nowadays. So we haven't, and the university doesn't want to let old things fall down while building new things up. And so I think those were very good moves.
Right. Well, I feel somewhat selfish being able to ask all the questions, so I guess I should let others have that opportunity as well. So if we could open the floor.
But Paul, who knows what they'll ask?
If you have a question, if you would raise your hand, and again, for anyone online, if you have a question, if you would either submit it through the Primetime website, which is hr.duke.edu/primetime, or email it to working@duke.edu. We'll take some questions that you may have.
There's one down here.
It's getting there.
Hi. We understand that gender violence is a huge problem on Duke's campus.
I didn't hear the word you said.
We understand that gender violence is a huge problem on Duke's campus that's being addressed by different efforts such as the mandatory reporting policy and increasing bystander intervention efforts. But what would it take for the administration to make a decision to make victims of gender violence a top priority on this campus?
Well, I'll go back. I take the subject you raised very, very seriously. I'm not going to begin by agreeing that gender violence is a huge problem on this campus. I don't think that the statistics bear that out in relation to other places in the world. To say that is not to say that gender violence is not a serious issue wherever it exists. And what would it take to make it a high priority? I would say that we would regard that as an extremely high priority on this campus, and the development of the Women's Center, the bodies of training, the changing of a policy so that people have an obligation to report things they see or hear are all steps in that direction. It's not, there are problems that exist in any human community that no community is ever going to reach the place where it can say, we will never have that problem again. Right, but it seems to me what you want is an atmosphere in which the right to be free from sexual harassment in any form is completely understood, and people feel an obligation about that. And when you talk about bystander training, this is enormously significant. A community where somebody stands by while they see somebody else do something is a community where a lot more stuff is going to happen than one where people say, hey, that's just not a good idea, or hey, let's go, let's go do something else. And so I understand that there is a serious administration role in addressing these issues and in training people, in hiring personnel, all those kinds of things. But it seems to me also we have to understand this is an issue that relies on the responsible behavior of every member of the community as part of its solution. It can never be solved as an administrative issue alone.
I'm going to sprinkle in a few questions that we received in advance.
How are you getting them? Oh, I see. You got them in advance.
I have them in advance.
I thought you were receiving them telepathically.
Apple's good, but I don't think they've developed an app for that. This one comes from Josh Hewitt, who is curious about our colleagues down the road. What is your reaction to what has been taking place with our friends down the road at UNC? What types of controls does Duke have in place to prevent the misuse of funds? Does the Duke administration plan to launch any investigations into our own systems and protocols?
Well, Duke is supposed to have a famous rivalry with UNC, and in ways we do, but I'd have to say I regard the presence of UNC in this area as a great asset for this university, and I know that people at UNC regard Duke as a great asset. Two are better than one if two can play as one, as Coach K famously said, and we fight with them in certain areas, but we cooperate with them in others. I regard Holden Thorpe as a serious personal friend of mine, a person I greatly admire, and so I don't want to take any cheap shots at difficulties that they have had over there. I see when you talk about down the road, they take two forms. One this fall that involved employees being taken on and expenses, planes, things like that. And of course the prior one about athletics, and I'll say something about that as well. Probably the single area in which Duke has made the greatest enhancement of effort in the years that I've been president here has been in everything to do with compliance. Research compliance, financial compliance, athletic compliance, because people can misbehave in any way you can behave at a university, you can misbehave in a university. And any way anyone misbehaves is a way that drags the whole reputation of the university down with it. This is what exactly has happened with UNC, right? And so there are a lot of people who work here. Mike Sumich is the leader of the effort. I get reports every year of what the plan for compliance audits is through the year. I get reports almost every week telling me of some office that's been audited and what's been found. Typically, no findings, but if there are ones, systemic solutions are put in place. My own travel expenses are scrutinized and inquired into, and everything in the university. And the most compliance in the world can't prevent problems, but I think it does help to support an attitude in which people realize we're expecting good behavior, we're expecting right behavior, and if that expectation alone is insufficient, actually we're probably going to catch you, because we have the mechanisms for it. To say something about the athletic problems, I'd have to say that when the story first began to break, I actually asked several people from athletics to come to my office and explain to me how I could have confidence that we wouldn't have the kind of issues about academic problems for student athletes. And I was told, I was just flabbergasted by the amount of care that is taken about this matter and the amount of oversight. Now, as I say, in any human community, no amount of oversight can absolutely guarantee you against something bad happening, but we take these things very, very seriously here.
Other questions?
Why don't you ask me another of your telepathic questions? Oh, here's a hand.
We have one
here's
over
a
here.
hand over here. There are people who come, since I live next to the football field, I know this. There are lots of people who come and go up and down the stairs of the football stadium as a form of exercise, and now I see this can be done in Griffith Auditorium as well.
This is a question from a reader. Duke has committed to carbon neutrality by 2024, which will require 8.3 to 12 million tons of offsets, according to Duke's Climate Action Plan. Duke's current offset programs with swine waste and energy efficiency come nowhere close to what is needed to achieve neutrality. Is Duke still committed to carbon neutrality? And if so, where will the balance of offsets come from?
Well, the answer to the question is yes. Duke is still committed to carbon neutrality. There's a document that Duke signed on to. We were one of the early signers, pledging to reduce carbon emissions from our university. I think eventually about 120 universities signed this document by 50% over a period of time. We chose the year 2024 because it was long enough to give us time to make changes, but close enough to put some pressure on us. Also because it would be the year of the 100th anniversary of the university. The question that was put to me is about offsets, but I would not begin carbon emissions by talking about offsets. Offsets are the way you deal with the part of the problem you haven't been able to solve in any other way. We have reduced carbon emissions on this campus between the day we signed that letter and now by 11%. That's not a trivial amount. And if you know it, did some of you used to work up near the place right by the medical school where the gigantic pile of coal sat there, looking like the place where maybe Santa reloaded for the presents for bad boys and girls? And actually, I remember when I first looked on Google Earth at the Duke campus, there was a place on Google Earth called Coal Pile Drive. Okay, and you remember right through the hospital there used to be a railroad line in which trucks of coal could come right through the patients down to dump coal onto Coal Pile Drive. Guess what? There's no coal pile there anymore. This university, we switched from coal to natural gas, which, as you know, produces many fewer carbon emissions on the East Campus, and that was such a success we've now switched on the West Campus. These are extraordinary efforts. I give a world of credit to Tallman Trask for his leadership in this regard. Many other people too, Tavy McDaniel certainly, but Tallman has really been the genius of this, and he really has his heart in it. When you leave the Bryant Center, do you know that there are solar panels on top of this building now? There didn't used to be. Do you know that there is a green wall on the new parking deck that's been opened at the hospital? And when we build new buildings, don't forget, we can build them at a level of energy efficiency that was never imagined when these buildings were built, right? And so every time we rehabilitate a building, you're actually able to significantly reduce the energy use, and every new building even more so. I'd say one last thing, and then I will answer the offset question, lest you think I forgot it, which is here again, and I would go back to the question you raised about sexual violence on campus. The university can't be expected by people alone can't solve the problem of carbon emissions in the university. It takes acts by the administration, it takes choices at a high level. But it can't be solved by administration entirely either. It actually has to be solved by the behavior of everybody all day long. If when you go to your office, you turn the air conditioning way down every day when it's actually fairly reasonable temperature already, you're using a lot more, you're producing a lot more emissions. The hardest thing we have at this campus controlling is the fact that people come in single cars to work here. That's a big source of emissions for us. If we could have a public transportation system and people would convert to it, that would be a very significant way of reducing these issues. Offsets are something people purchase to offset carbon savings they can't create on their own. There, what Duke has tried to do is, we don't want to buy certificates for the products of wind farms in Kansas. They have nothing to do with us. That doesn't make any sense. So what we have done is, we've tried to lead a research effort to figure out how could you produce things in this state and in this region that would benefit its economy and would be the source of carbon offsets. That's a good use of, universities are places of knowledge, so this is using knowledge in social service, and that's where the question about the swine waste came from.
So I think I've heard you say this before, knowledge and service to society as well as a benefit down the road in terms of offsets for us.
Well, the interesting thing about us is our business is the knowledge and teaching business, right? And so we have one of the 2 or 3 greatest environment schools in the world is one of the defining features of Duke. So we don't want to just control thermostats at our university. We want our researchers to produce the new answers for the future that will enable the world not to use energy as wastefully as it currently does.
Other questions? It's hard to see. I think there's a question back here.
I can't see it.
Hi, I'm Ben Kimmel with Duke Web Services, and we're located down in American Tobacco campus. 15 years or so ago, Duke had both an interesting relationship with the town in which many people thought it needed desperately to be more involved to help Durham grow, and at the same time felt like it was aloof and separated from it. And clearly that has changed significantly. Durham has come up, but Duke has been a huge part of that.
That's right.
So with this sense of the forward trajectory of the university and its expansion globally and virtually, can you talk some about its continued relationship with Durham, both good and bad, if there is such a thing?
Certainly. I think there was a time when a lot of universities in America were located in a place but didn't pay much attention to the place they were located. You may know I used to be at Yale. That used to be true in olden days of the relation between Yale and New Haven. When I came here, it was very striking that in Nan Cohen's presidency, and John Burness was a big part of it, of trying to figure out how we could become an involved and positive force in the future of Durham. So I inherited much good work that they began, and a lot of things have continued on our, on our watch. Sitting down here, I see Fail Wynn, not only the former leader of Durham Tech, but really the mastermind who created that as one of the great job training centers in the southeastern United States, who came to work in the office next to mine as the vice president for Durham and regional affairs. How could Duke help in the city? There's many different fronts, and it seems to me you want to do them all together. Part of it has been economic development. You're in American Tobacco. What did American Tobacco look like 15 years ago? You could pick up any brick and hit a rat with it, I would guess. Right, it was an abandoned and derelict structure. Now, we have a waiting list of people who want to get into the buildings down there. Duke didn't do it all, but Duke pledged to take 20% of the space, and with that pledge, the developers were able to go to the bank and secure the money and do the rest of the development. Now look at the way downtown has been developed between American Tobacco and now. You have all the different diamond views. You have the new buildings that are going up. I went downtown last night. I was misinformed. I went to Seattle last week, and I was told that the greatest pizza chef in Seattle was relocating in Durham, North Carolina, and was going to open a place called Pizzeria Toro at the 5 Points, the crossroads of East Chapel Hill Street. I went there last night. I was wrong. It doesn't open until next Tuesday, but I'll tell you, that didn't used to be on that corner. Do you go to the farmer's market? The farmer's market is the cool place to be. It's just, this is a happening place, and you love it because when you go downtown or go to the farmer's market, it's everybody. It's not just some people. It's the whole community coming together. The funny thing is, Durham had something that was a liability for a while. We have a failed industrial landscape, and it isn't even industrial. It's a warehouse landscape. But strange to say, this landscape is the one that entrepreneurs want to be located in. They don't want to be in office towers. They don't want to be in suburban office complexes. There's not a single important entrepreneurial firm that's located in such a place. They want to be in funky cities where people run into each other, and all different kinds of people are there together. That's the future of Durham. And Duke benefits from that. We have over 2,000 workers downtown now. That's a pretty big stimulus package for the downtown economy. We work much more closely with the Durham Public Schools than we used to, and the Duke Health System, excuse me, has had very active and I think imaginative involvement working on community health in this city. So I think health, education, and economic development, they travel together. But what did we see? Do you remember? Wasn't this January, but last January? The New York Times had a list of the 41 places to go in that year. Do you remember this? Only 5 of them were located in the United States, and one of them was Durham, North Carolina. Go Durham. I can't resist telling you, I was told last year that someone was going to build as a new construction, a pseudo old tobacco warehouse in Chapel Hill. Other guys imitate us, but the original is still the greatest.
There was one question that was submitted, and I kid you not, where is your favorite place to eat? We know the answer off campus. His question was specifically what.
How do you know the answer off campus? What makes you think you know the answer? Where's my favorite place to eat on campus? All right. Why don't I get ready to alienate at least 40 food vendors on this campus? I like lots of places. I like the fact that there are lots of places. And if I had a Tony guest, I might take them to the Nasher, which has a great cafe, great place for lunch. I like to go to Twinnies. I go to the places near me. But if you said, all right, buddy, you have only one lunch to have, what would you order? I would order the tomato soup and the grilled cheese from the refectory.
Very nice. So I think if we have more questions, if you would just raise your hand so we can see you. Another question that came in earlier was around healthcare. And so this question is from Marianne Mill. As an employee of Duke University Health Systems, I see on a daily basis the decisions families must face when paying for their healthcare needs. Can you share your insight into how Duke will face these rising healthcare costs as they relate to Duke employees?
Well, healthcare hits Duke two ways. We're a provider of healthcare, right? We see something like 350,000 patients a year. So changes in healthcare are very consequential for Duke and its activity. But healthcare hits us another way. We have 37,000 employees, and very few of our employees have elected the healthcare plan of their spouse. Vice versa. I think we have, what did you tell me, Kyle? We have over 60,000 lives within the Duke Health Plan. That's a lot of people. Now, what do we all know about healthcare? We know that the cost of it has, over the last 20 years, continued to rise at about twice the rate of inflation. Up and up and up and up. I looked up once upon a time, the year I graduated from college, healthcare made up 6% of the American economy. 5 years ago, it made up 16%, and it's on its way to making up 20% of the American economy. So this is just an extraordinary thing. And we know that how to manage the cost of it is one of the great unsolved political questions of this time. You watched the political debate last night, and a lot of it is about healthcare, but the truth is, no one knows for positive how to do it, but everyone knows that we can't go forward with the rising healthcare costs. Now, the first thing that I would say, the best way to mitigate those, both nationally and locally, is again at the level of individual behavior. Waiting until you're really, really sick is a really, really expensive model of healthcare. If this community can teach itself good living habits, healthy habits of living, we actually will be reducing the cost of healthcare. And in our community programs in the city, that's got to be a big part, is the preventive care, because you know that the single most expensive form of healthcare is to go to the emergency room. So if you wait till something's an emergency, that wasn't a good idea. But there's still the question of the cost of healthcare benefits. Really good people work at this university, and I'm sure he didn't do it all alone. But Kyle Kavanaugh, as the head of HR, they have worked so hard with the vendors of the health plans we work at to bring the rates down. Duke gets way better deals than a lot of people do, and we have seen less rise in our premium than has been typical nationally. In some cases, we've had only about half the rise that we have seen nationally. What is our spend for healthcare benefits? $240 million Duke spends budgets for healthcare benefits for its workers. That's a lot of money, and if it goes up 10%, in a year, then all of a sudden it's $264 million. So controlling that rise, A, by the contracts we get, B, by the work that's been done, getting people to switch to generic versions of drugs that are interchangeable in their effect, C, getting people to do the cheaper mail order prescriptions. These things have saved, what you told me one of the moves had saved $8 million a year, and two others had saved $3 million a year. Now let's stop and think. If Duke had to pay $11 more million this year that hadn't been controlled by our excellent HR staff, where would it come from? There's only two choices. We could pass it along to you, well, that doesn't sound like much fun, or we could save it internally. But we don't have any way to save it except by reducing the number of people who work for this university. There's no other way we could save it. So really, this is why it's an urgent matter for us. We want to make things as easy as we can for those who work here, and we want to be able to have the right workforce here. We don't want the false necessities that are bred by excessively costly health care. It's a hard issue. You tell me, what are you guessing 5 years from now? Will this country have bent the curve so it isn't rising as fast? It's bent some, but this is an urgent issue for our society.
Other questions? we have one back here.
The Stairmaster. Oh, it's Leonora. I didn't even know it was you.
This is another question from an online viewer. What are we doing at Duke to improve academic offerings related to ethnicity, race, and inclusivity?
Well, there's two things that I'd say about that. One is the academic offerings, and the two is the value of those things in this in this community. Duke has nationally known programs in African and African American studies and women's studies, many such things. And there's one where there's growth to be achieved. I would speak more broadly. It seems to me that what you really want is for the issues surrounding human difference to be understood as fundamental commitments of the university and broad university values that all of us have a responsibility to live up to. When you ask me what's special about this year, I can tell you about the students who won the gold medals, and I can tell you about the new cancer center. But one of the very sharply distinguishing features of this year at Duke is this is the 50th anniversary of the first arrival of African American students at Duke. This is a formerly segregated university. Not surprising. It was, I think, the first private university in the South to integrate. But still, that history is not infinitely far before. And it reminds us that, it used to be permissible and even official law in this country to discriminate, to give people different opportunities based on discriminations that had nothing to do with their ability, their character, anything of that sort. We've lived through, in the history of this country, there's no more important thing that has happened in the last 50 years than the effort to identify form after form of discrimination and to say, we're not having that anymore, right? So first racial discrimination, other kinds of ethnic discrimination, gender discrimination, discrimination based on sexual preference or sexual orientation. These are very important values, and I'd have to say I regard this as a year when we all ought to see it as our business to use this 50th anniversary to remember the importance of all of these values at this university and to challenge each other to live up to the highest standards with respect to them.
I think that addresses a couple other questions we received in advance around the Women's Initiative Project and supporting retaining LGBTQ.
I'll happily speak to any of them if you want.
Sure. The questions are really around efforts being made to recruit, support, and retain LGBT faculty and staff, as well as the
Sure.
Women's Initiative.
Okay. One of the things is racial discrimination became negatively stigmatized in this country long before sexual preference did. If you think through the 70s or even into the 80s, the level of official homophobia in this country was very, very high, it seemed to me. And actually, if you talk to people who went to universities who were in their 40s or their 50s, they were not out when they were in college. That was not an easy thing to be. So really that has been one of the most recent fronts for important action on this respect. But I think this university, there's always work to do, and there's always progress to make, but the fact that Duke was one of the first universities to give same-sex partner benefits, I think that goes back to 1994. That was a very early day to take that move, and was a very important thing. When West Union is done, there's still discussion about the proper space allocations of it, but the LGBT Center is going to be located in a primo location of prize centrality and visibility on this campus, and that's an important thing too. Did you try to go downtown last weekend and find that you actually couldn't get anywhere because of the Pride Parade? This place, I think, has a deservedly positive reputation on that front, and important for us to continue to work to achieve it.
So I think we have time maybe for one more question.
Now that I've told you my favorite place for lunch.
We do have one that came in that I'll ask if there's not one in the audience.
Okay.
Since the economic downturn, we have lost some important staffing support in critical areas. What efforts are underway to assure adequate staffing support in the areas of new university initiatives and priorities, and as we continue the addition of new faculty hires?
Okay. Well, we went through part of the answer a little while ago. When we had to make the $100 million reduction, we knew we had to reduce the workforce. 70% of the budget of this university is in salaries and compensation, so there's no other place to do it. And we did indeed reduce the size of the workforce without mass involuntary layoffs. That was a very important thing. Now, we tried to do that strategically. We did not have a meat-axe approach, as many schools have had, of 5% reductions or 10% reductions across the board. We tried to preserve all the positions that were most important to the fulfillment of our most critical functions. And I think we did a reasonably good job of that. Now, as the economy has come back, we have indeed added back some of those positions. But I'm telling you, we've got to be careful that we don't spend the first sunny day, you live through a hurricane, and then the sun comes out one day, and so you hire everybody back, you fill all the positions you had filled before, and then you discover you've got another problem the next year. We need to maintain discipline in this process, or we're creating simply new problems for ourselves down the road. I think one of the really important things is there was a process called DART, sort of looking at the array of administrative resources at this university during the downturn, and one of the very useful things it found was a lot of people, you have 50 units side by side, each of which has a special person to do each of 40 separate functions. And it's not only not efficient, it doesn't even give you the best results. And so we find, rather than every department having to have its own grant research officer, you can create shared positions that actually bring a higher level of expertise to more different people. It used to be everybody had to have their own communications officer. I think we've made important progress on that regard. So in other words, it seems to me it would be a wrong goal for us to say our goal was to go exactly back to the map of employment that took place in 2007. We should go forward to a smart workforce and get the best people we can and have their skills arrayed in the most imaginative ways to get our mission accomplished. Okay.
Well, I'd like to thank you for joining us again today. It's been a wonderful discussion. And before you leave, we do have the raffle. If I could get your assistance in selecting our two winners who get the pleasure of lunch with you later this year. And I do want to remind you that...
Where are we going to have this lunch?
It's up to you and up to them. But there is a reception upstairs in Schaefer Mall.